to precisely define what you think that means, but if you just heard that a corporation is a legal fiction, raise your hand. For real. Look at all those hands go up. Corporation, legal fiction. It's a legal fiction. It's a legal fiction. Corporation is a legal fiction. My friends, that begs the question. What does the word fiction mean? Not true, made up, unreal, right? And check this out. In law school, we are taught as lawyers to understand that a corporation doesn't actually exist in the physical material world. You know, reality? It doesn't actually exist. But we are taught and trained to pretend like this group of people who come together, and the material and the resources and the contractual obligations and the cultural assumptions. I mean, a very complex, very dynamic concept. We're going to pretend like it's one thing in the physical world so that we can treat it a certain way under law. And remember, my friends, if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, poof! We create a corporation because a corporation is a construct. It comes into being because we say so. And I think it's important to recognize that the word corporation comes from Latin because the first corporations ever created by the genius of creative, clever human beings occurred during the Roman Republic. Not, by the way, during the Roman Empire. And sometimes I wish we would spend more time asking, hey, what happens when a republic devolves into an empire? Because that might be an important conversation to have in the United States. Just saying. Or, as the great Texas comedian Bill Hicks would say, I'm just planting seeds. Just throwing it out there. Maybe this will come up in conversation when we open it up for our discussion. But the thing is, the Romans created the corporation as a construct for a reason. For example, y'all heard the phrase, all roads lead to Rome? Right here, 2,000 years later, we still say that, right? That road system was built and operated as a corporation. Likewise, the aqueduct system, this amazing bit of engineering that moved water all across the Italian peninsula without electricity. Quick little parenthetical. You know, one of the reasons I maintain such high optimism and confidence is because human beings are clever. We can do amazing things. See, our problems are usually not technological problems. There are actually solutions to all the problems that vex us today. Our problems are political problems because we do not have the power to implement the solutions that exist. But that aqueduct system, can you guess? It was a corporation. Likewise, the first universities, the first hospitals, somebody say it. Corporation. So what does a road system, a water system, a university, a hospital, what do all of these things have in common? Yeah, they're all corporations, but what are they doing? Who are they serving? People. They're all serving the public, or the people collectively. The genius of the corporation as a concept is to take private money, material, and resources and put it to a public use. But check it out. Unlike taxes, which are mandatory, the genius and what makes the corporation unique, it was done on a voluntary basis. So I want to be clear about something, my friends. David Cobb is not anti-corporation. The Move to Amend coalition that I represent and am part of is not anti-corporation. Corporations as a construct have been put to perfectly good and useful activities, right? The question, that's not it. To say you're either pro-corporate or anti-corporate is a very unsophisticated way to really be thinking about it. The question is, what is our political system? What is our economic system? What is our legal system? These are more appropriate ideas, but the idea of the instrument or the tool, that doesn't actually make sense, right? So, here's the thing. I also really want to underscore something, my friends. This is not how the modern transnational corporation is operating, is it? That's because the modern transnational corporation that we think of today actually comes out of the 14th and 15th century of Europe. You know, the age of discovery. I have to put discovery in my little imaginary quotation marks because what did the Europeans discover in the 14th and 15th century? Well, Africa, Asia, later North and South America. Newsflash, there were people living there. They weren't lost. They didn't need to be discovered. In fact, they weren't discovered. So in the same spirit of honesty and courage, let's tell the truth. The 14th and 15th century of Europe was the age of rape and pillage and plunder and murder. There's one word that sums that up best for me, and that's empire. See, this is the age of imperialism. That's what colonialism means. It means beating people down. It means stealing their resources. And get this is important. The modern transnational corporation didn't just kind of accidentally get created during the age of the modern empire, but the modern transnational corporation was created as an intentional, deliberate instrument of empire. For example, one of the most famous of those they were called joint stock companies. And the most famous, or one of the most famous of the early joint stock companies, was a little outfit known as the East India Company. I see several of you have heard of this one, right? The East India Company, literally designed to militarily conquer the entire subcontinent of India. And not only that, not only did they conquer them militarily, but to destroy the existing institutions and civilization that existed there so that they could recreate the entire civilization to force those people to work and labor, to steal the resources from their own land so that that wealth could be shipped back to Europe as profit for the shareholders of the East India Company. It was a business model based on imperialism. Another of those early joint stock companies was the Africa Trading Company. Anybody want to guess what the Africa Trading Company traded? Thank you. Because you know what? I'm going to use myself as an example because I think that white people have got to get more comfortable being honest, talking about race and understanding something. Because honestly, folks, if I'm just casual and asked, what did the Africa Trading Company trade? The word that would pop into my head, and almost everybody, is slaves. Why? Well, because we were taught as children about how horrible the Africa slave trade was, or the transatlantic slave trade. We were taught to revere Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and others, runaway slaves who helped other slaves get away, and how wonderful that was. But now that I've made such a big deal about the word slave, let me ask you, when the Africa Trading Company was operating, was Africa populated by slaves? No. Africa was populated by people, right? And now, my friends, to go deep for just a moment, Africa was populated by people who were basically just like me. Now, I say that with some trepidation because I know what pigment I have. I'm not stupid. But I say it with conviction because if you ask any scientist, if you ask any biologist, she or he will tell you race does not exist. Obviously, skin color exists, but so does eye color and hair color and facial features. See, the ethnicity exists, but race does not. You see, pigment exists as a difference. Like, we can look around and see different pigments in this room, but no scientist would ever elevate this to a taxonomy or a classification. And in fact, at the DNA level, it's so ridiculous that you can't even really make any difference about it. So let's just be clear, race does not exist. But stay with me because this is important. Racism damn sure does. Well, how can that be? Oh yes, if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, it's true. Racism exists because we collectively had said that race will exist, and the reason I'm trying to really drive this home is because I think it's important to recognize that what links inextricably racism, imperialism, and corporatism is the concept of exploitation and oppression. That's what is at the core of all of these concepts. And so, if we're going to really be transformational, if we're really going to come to a place where we recreate society so that it is in ecological, sustainable fashion and is actually fair and just, We've got to come to terms with any political or economic system that is fundamentally based on exploiting or oppressing people. That stuff has got to go. That stuff has got to go. Right? Yeah. So, here's the thing. Since we're telling a story, and I want to now make this a uniquely U.S. story, here's a question. How many colonies in the founding of the United States of America? Folks, this is an easy one. 13, right? Everybody knows that, right? So let's try it again. How many colonies in the founding of the United States? 13. So since you all know that, here's the real question. Of those 13 colonies, how many of them were corporations? Nicely done. It was a trick question, but the answer is all of them. That's because the word corporation means to have or create body. And I'm here to tell you that it took the king to create or give body to each one of those corporations. Now, somebody might be thinking, well, that's ridiculous. Massachusetts was already here. The king didn't just poof create the land. But see, that's why it's a trick question. The land was here. The people who lived on the land, right? Physical reality, it was already here. But it took the king to create Massachusetts. And the king created Massachusetts by the use of a very important legal principle, an instrument. Do you know what that instrument is called that the king used to create Massachusetts? Nicely done. It's a charter. To illustrate how it is that the king created Massachusetts by the use of a legal charter, we'll do another little exercise together. In this exercise, I'll be the king. Why do y'all think I get to be the king in this exercise? Hey, I like y'all in Tampa. This is a sharp crowd. Because I'm telling the story. So not only should we ask, what are the stories that are being told that are creating these cultural narratives? We would do well to ask, who's telling these damn stories? When we turn on the television or the radio or any of the corporate media where we're bombarded constantly by these kinds of stories of consumerism and materialism, like we should ask, what is their motivation? But I am telling this story, and so I will show you how the king created Massachusetts by the use of this legal instrument known as the charter. And to do so, I'm going to actually quote from the actual charter that created Massachusetts. So, I, the king, create Massachusetts with nothing more than a writing instrument and the political power that I have. I create it by using a charter, but I'm not going to bother with administering Massachusetts on the day-to-day. I'm the king. I've got other people to exploit and oppress, which apparently are kingly duties. So instead, I will assign a royal governor, a creation of a new entity, a new social institution called a royal governor. And I will assign the royal governor, and here comes the quote from the actual charter that created Massachusetts. I, the king, create Massachusetts. I assign a royal governor, and the royal governor's job, his legal responsibility, is to plant, to rule, and to govern this new area known as Massachusetts, to benefit me, the king, but to also benefit the other shareholders of the joint stock company known as the Massachusetts Bay Trading Company. See, Massachusetts began as a for-profit corporation on the same exploitive, oppressive business model as the East India Company. So too was it the Rhode Island and Providence Plantation. Virginia was the Virginia Company. Georgia began as a penal corporation or a prison corporation. By the way, you know what skin color the original slaves had who worked that corporation? White. Here is something, my friends. Race got created as a construct for a reason. And it wasn't, yes, to try to justify the depraved institution of slavery, but even deeper, race got created to confuse people with my pigment. That is to say, race gets created to confuse working class white people who say, man, This economic system sucks. The boss man's got his boot on my neck. I hate this. I'm being constantly oppressed. But at least I'm white. This is important, my friends. White people have got to come to terms with the fact that this, white skin privilege exists as a veneer. It's true, and we have to acknowledge that. But the concept of thinking that pigment matters was used to confuse white people to prevent us from seeing the solidarity that we have with our sisters and brothers who have different pigment that are being exploited and oppressed as well. White folks have got to come to terms with what racism really means and white skin privilege, and if we're going to build a movement, it's going to have to be multiracial, it's going to have to be multi-ethnic, and we're going to have to understand that we got a class similarity. Are y'all with me here? Are y'all with me on this one? Right? There is a ruling elite, and being white does not put you in the ruling elite. It might give you a thin veneer of protection for a hot second, but trust me, as corporate capitalism becomes to unwind, your white skin privilege is not going to give you access to the big barriers and the big walls. Money does, and I mean lots of it, and that's the only thing that they really care about. So, the point I'm making again is that as we think about this, there is another word. We wouldn't call today the administrator of the joint stock company or the corporation, we wouldn't call them a royal governor. What word would we use? CEO. That's right, Jennifer, a CEO. So the point I'm making is, my friends, the American revolutionaries were not calling for more socially responsible kings. They were not calling for more socially responsible CEOs. Maybe today we ought to do the same. Really, is that all? Think about it. Do we really just want to say, oh, Massey Coal Corporation, would you please not kill quite so many coal miners? Oh, British Petroleum Corporation, would you please not destroy the entire Gulf of Mexico's ecosystem? Is that really all we want? A little less death? A little less destruction? A little less of the oppression? Maybe we can raise our aspirations a little higher. Frankly, maybe we should remember that in this country, we are the descendants of revolutionaries. Maybe we can remember that we actually come from that stock. And it's worth pointing out, my friends, that although I say the American revolutionaries weren't calling for a more socially responsible king, just 10 years before the revolution really erupted, those people who would become revolutionaries, they were writing letters to the king that went like this. Oh, Father King, we, your humble and obedient children, come before you on bended knee to beg that you please, oh Father King, intervene on our behalf, because your royal governor is administering unfair business laws. It wasn't just taxation without representation. It was unfair international trade and business rules. That's what the Stamp Act and the Navigation Act was all about. Oh, Father King, they said, the English Parliament are passing unfair international rules that benefit the East India Company over us, your good subjects. Quick pop quiz. What percentage of the English Parliament passing these laws do you think owned shares in the East India Company? All of them, Anita. I wonder if that's related. Oh, Father King, they said, will you please intervene on our behalf? It was the most sniveling, groveling language you can imagine. And I don't know about you, but I am genuinely, keenly interested in asking myself, what stories were they telling each other? What happened? What happened in their heads, in their hearts? What was it that convinced an entire group of people in one decade to get up off their knees, to stop begging and pleading the king, instead to stand up, put their shoulders back, put their chin up, look directly at the king, you know, the king who claimed cultural authority from God? And behind the king, see the most powerful military empire the world had ever assembled and said, you're all done, get out, we gonna do it different. Because let me tell you something, folks, the process I just described, that is magic. And I'm not joking. If one person stands up against injustice and oppression, that's a courageous act, and we need to applaud it and be thankful for it, but it's not magic. See, the magic can only be invoked when one person stands up against injustice and oppression, and somebody to her left stands up, and somebody to her right stands up, and you get this collective movement of standing up together. And at this point, I just got to say, may the goddess bless the Occupy movement. Right? Bless the Occupy movement, because I think the Occupy movement was and is magic. Because Occupy wasn't just daring us to occupy public space. Occupy invited us and challenged us to occupy imagination space. To imagine what would life be like in this country if we actually did not accept the story that we were told. And may I say, my friends, with sincerity, a big part of the reason that the Obama administration worked with the Department of Homeland Security and police office departments all across this country is because I humbly submit to you, nonviolent revolution was brewing at Occupy encampments all across this country. People were figuring out, where is our common ground? What's going on? The 1% meme is class analysis, y'all. That's the bottom line. That is very sophisticated class analysis. And imagine, I had the privilege of rolling up on probably 40 or 50 Occupy encampments because of how I travel. And all but once, I was really warmly welcomed. And I don't ask, I will not tell you the one place that I wasn't. But as you all know, or probably know, Occupy had its own flavor, right? But I can tell you this, because, Move to Amend would never dare to speak for Occupy, but we happily collaborate with Occupy. And by engaging the Occupy movement, the horizontal movement that it was, with respect and a recognition of it being a movement, not a leader-less movement, but a leader-full movement, where everybody actually, their voices were appreciated and participatory. See, by approaching it that way, I think it's worth pointing out that Occupy was a very important movement, and Move to Amend is a campaign that is a concrete way to articulate systemic transformational change, right? There is a partnership that is just ready-made between Occupy and Move to Amend. And I said Occupy was and is magic because although the encampments were destroyed by operation of the state, make no mistake about it, in 2013, I am eager to figure out what Occupy 2.0 looks like. Right? Because I'm here to tell you, I don't know what it's going to be, but there are too many people in too many conversations right now. There is going to be something called Occupy 2.0, and I and Move to Amend stands ready to collaborate with whatever it looks like. Yeah? Thank you. So, if you'll be very quick, because I want to do the frame and then we'll open it up. All right, so you'll be first whenever we open it up. So, because I want to remind you that in the American there was a revolution, right? And for those of you who are curious or who might be wondering, I'm happy to tell you that in the American Revolution, the revolutionaries won. Right? So, a corny joke perhaps, but it's worth saying there was a revolution, and what that gives is an opportunity to create a new charter. A new charter is created to describe how this system is supposed to operate. We're sometimes taught to think of this charter as the supreme law of the land. What's that charter called? The U.S. Constitution. How many of y'all have read the U.S. Constitution? Good, a lot of hands go up. Y'all grade my papers. See if I get this right. I'll tell you, when you read the Constitution in its entirety, not just the individual words, but when you read the Constitution in its entirety, you'll see two actors. The first actor is the most important actor. In fact, it's so important, it's the first three words. Folks, those are hallowed words in this country, and they should be. See, we the people come together to create the second actor, which is government itself. Saying it this way, please understand, we the people are real. Government is a construct as well. We create it. Government is dependent upon us. This is a very important idea. If we really understood how much power we have, government is dependent upon us. And deeper still, For some of you of a particular sort of political persuasion will recognize that properly understood, the people should never be afraid of the government. In fact, government should be afraid of the people. Right? Yeah. It's a different mindset. See, in this document, we the people are described as free and sovereign. Free as in liberty, and sovereign. What does the word sovereign mean again? The authority to rule. See, we the people claim the authority to rule our own damn selves. And the king is not sovereign. We kicked his butt out. But watch this. Government isn't sovereign either. In fact, government is supposed to be subordinate and accountable. Government is subordinate to whom? The people. Government is accountable to whom? The people. This has got a ring to it, doesn't it? I like how this is going. Let's continue. See, we the people are free and sovereign because we the people have rights. Government does not have rights. Government only has duties. And my friends, as a lawyer, I have to stop for a moment and point out something. The difference between rights and duties is profound. You see, if I have the right to do something, it means I can do it. And I don't need anybody's permission. I don't need this group's permission. I don't have to go to the Tampa City Council to ask permission. I don't have to go to the Florida State Legislature for permission. Thank goodness with your crazy-ass legislature. I don't have to go to Congress for permission. Man, y'all, I'm from Texas. I don't need my mama's permission. Legally, I don't need my mama's permission. Culturally is a different story. And part of the reason I do that is because, like, in Texas, we say something that I think y'all in Florida say too. If mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Amen. The point I am making, though, is to really understand that our reality is not just about legal things, but there is a culture associated with it. That's important too. But under the constitutional framework, my rights are sacred and sacrosanct. Not only do I not need advance permission, but if any governmental body, local, county, state, or federal, tries to infringe upon my rights to exercise my constitutional rights, government's wrong, not me, and I ought to be able to go into court and overturn those laws. See, government doesn't have rights over the people. Government only has duties to the people. And where do those duties come from? Well, remember, governmental duties are the same thing as responsibilities. Where do governmental responsibilities come from? Well, remember, my friends, all power resides with the people. In fact, Jefferson is famous for having said, the only government that is legitimate is the government that has the full consent of the governed. See, this is important. And a quick pop quiz now. What is the population, more or less, of Tampa, Florida?
3,000.
Say it again?
3,000.
All right, let's just say 1 million. That's a good round number. So I will celebrate that 1 million folks in Tampa hold all the political power. That's a true statement. It's an important statement. It's a profound statement. I will celebrate that 1 million folks in Tampa hold all the political power, but I'll tell you this. I don't want to go to a meeting of 1 million people where we decide, hey, where should the stop signs go? And I like political meetings. I'm not going to that one. Can you imagine? See, in our system, we the people hold all the power, but we do delegate a certain amount of our power to government. Do we delegate all our power to government? Hell no! We only delegate enough power for government to perform the duties that we have already told them to do. And how does government perform their duties? They write laws in the public interest. And there's going to obviously be debate on what those laws should be. And that's as it should be. And now, my friends, I got to say, I feel rather young to play the I remember when game. But I remember when you could have real political debate in this country and still be respectful to one another. Yes. I remember that. In fact, I can remember as a little boy, my daddy having what was a real political disagreement with our neighbor, Mr. Berry. Now, he wasn't our next door neighbor because I grew up in the country in Texas. And so, but Mr. Berry was the landowner next to us, right? So he was our closest neighbor that way. And I'll never forget as a little boy, it's like, oh my God, Daddy and Mr. Berry are fussing and arguing, and I thought it was going to get down to a fist fight at any moment. My eyes were big, and the next thing I know, Daddy, I don't know if it was Daddy or Mr. Berry who broke the ice, but the next thing I know, they're both laughing, and Daddy says, Berry, you coot, you're crazy, but I'll see you at the game, or I don't know what it was, but they were laughing, they broke the ice, right? And at the time, I was thinking, what happened? As a boy, I thought, what happened? As an adult, you know what I think happened? I think as an adult, I look back and I think that Daddy and Mr. Berry said, you know what? We may disagree with one another, but we're in this community together. And I watch your place whenever you're not around, and you watch my place, and our kids play together, and we're neighbors, and that matters. The fact that we're in community matters to one another, and we can have a disagreement that's really fierce, but it's not going to take us out of being in that kind of real human relationship. See, the thing is, folks, I'm telling you this. I hope y'all can tell that I have passion for my politics. I'm not saying that we should not be passionate. We should be passionate, but we should also be committed to being respectful to one another. And so even if somebody disagrees with me as we go into the discussion period, I promise you this, I'll be respectful to you. And I'll ask, in fact, I will insist that you be respectful to me. Because we can do this. We can do this. We can actually make this work. And I also want to remind you, yes, government passes laws in the public interest, and whether I like or dislike such a law, that is the law, right? But the one thing that no governmental law can do, whether I like it or not, that law can never violate the private rights of the people who live here. And now, my friends, oh my gosh, now that I've done this framing, stay with me. This is so important, because watch this. In 90 seconds, I'm going to now share with you how our